going on, my dear kumquats? Welcome back to another video. Today we've got more smash up content for you, and the faction we are reviewing is none other than the robots. Alright, 6th verse, same as the 5 other verses. The robots are from the base game. Now I'm glad I don't need to keep sounding like a skipping record, but the robots are not a standard faction. Indeed, the robots have 18 minions and 2 actions. Now the robots are all about spamming, so let's take a look at these robots and what makes them so spammable. The robots have 2 level 1 microbot reclaimers, which says if this is the first minion you played this turn, you may play an extra minion. Then it says shuffle any number of microbots from your discard pile into your deck. And just as a side note, everything that's on the top half of the slide are microbots. And these can actually be considered the placement of where your action cards actually would have been. Actually, I said actually way too much. So yeah, those microbots are supposed to be actions, but instead, they're minions which help out with your spamming. Alright, moving on, there are 2 level 1 microbot fixers which say if this minion is the first minion you played, you may play an extra minion, same thing as the microbot reclaimer, but except the ongoing ability is each of your microbots gains +1 power. You have 2 level 1 microbot guards which say destroy a minion on this base with power less than the number of minions that you have here. You have 1 level 1 microbot archive which says ongoing after one of your microbots, including this one, is destroyed, you get to draw a card. And then arguably the best minion in the faction is the microbot alpha. It has an ongoing ability that says it gains +1 power for each of your other microbots. And while it's in play, all of your other minions are considered microbots. So like I said, the top half are all microbots, but if that bad boy's in play, the bottom half, the Zapbots, the Hoverbots, the Warbots, and the Nukebot are all considered microbots. So there is a ton of synergy so long as the microbot alpha is in play. Because the microbot reclaimer and the fixer and the microbot archive all will mesh with the Zapbot, the Hoverbot, the Warbot, and the Nukebot so long as the microbot alpha is in play. So let's take a look at the quote-unquote standard minions of the robots faction. You have 2 level 4 Zapbots which say you may play an extra minion of power 2 or less. You have 3 level 3 Hoverbots which say reveal the top card of your deck, and if it is a minion you may play it as an extra minion, otherwise return it to the top of your deck. You have 2 level 4 Warbots which have an ongoing ability that says they cannot be destroyed, which is great because the robots have a ton of minions that are level 1 or level 2, which makes them very susceptible to destruction. So these 2 Warbots are pretty nice. And then finally, the King level 5 Nukebot minion has an ongoing ability that says after this minion is destroyed, you can destroy each other player's minions on this base. It's kind of interesting because most King minions do have synergy with how the faction is supposed to be ran. Now this faction is definitely all about spamming minions, which the Nukebot actually has nothing to do with. So yeah, pretty interesting. And just like I mentioned, the robots only have 2 actions, which are the same exact action, and it says choose a base, draw 1 card for each of your minions there, which is really, really nice because the robots just want to dig into their deck, hit all of their minions, and just play them all. So the robots are a pretty self-explanatory faction. They're all about spamming their minions and drawing into them. You have a decent amount of card draw with your 2 tech centers and your microbot archive, and then of course the spamming is just incredible. What I have laid out here is something that's pretty achievable even on your first turn of the game. Putting down a microbot fixer as well as putting down a hoverbot, which leads into a Zapbot, and you have a Zapbot in hand so you can play another Zapbot, and then you throw down your microbot alpha, and out of nowhere you already have 17 points, which there are many bases in the game that are 17 or less power. You could just take a base right off the bat. And like I said, it's not that crazy to get to this point. This is pretty standard for the robots. So what are the robots' weaknesses? Well, I think that the robots can have a few burst turns, but late game they can really just fizzle out, meaning they just don't have enough minions to spam. Yes, the robots do have 18 minions, but hey, when you really gotta burst, you gotta burst. Now many factions do have 1 or 2 cards that kind of help deal against the robots, such as block the path or maybe even hatchling, but these guys aren't perfect answers, and in fact, robots pretty much have 50-50s against almost anything that could be considered a bad matchup. We'll talk about that later on a few other slides, but yeah, they don't really have that many weaknesses, and that pretty much just shows you how powerful the robots are. So moving on to the great pairings for the robots, we know that the robots are infamous for its spamming ability, so what about adding even more spamming? Yes, the robot halflings is one of the most famous faction pairings to make if you want to lose your friends. Almost every single card in the halflings faction lets you spam extra minions. So it's really absolutely ridiculous how much spam you can have in just a single turn. If the robots were already at a 9 or a 10, this pretty much cranks it up to a 20. And I mean, it is ridiculous. Moving on to another pairing, we got the 𝐸𝐻𝐻 robots. Now we know 𝐸𝐻𝐻 has only the same minion, which are the locals, 10 copies of them in fact. And since robots are good at spamming, specifically minions of power level 2 or less, then this is a pretty good faction to pair with. And if you have the Titan Dagon, which really lets you just play extra minions, yeah, seems like a pretty good solid pairing to me. Not to mention the 𝐸𝐻𝐻 have plenty of cards like Spreading the Word, Sacred Circle, and In Plain Sight that really just help you play extra minions and also boost your defenses a bit. So yeah, 𝐸𝐻𝐻 is a pretty solid pairing. Another great pairing is the Mythic Horses. Now really the only minion in the Mythic Horses faction that lets you spam extra minions is in fact the Sea-Star, which says if you play this minion on a base where you have another minion, you can play an extra minion this turn, and you can only use one Sea-Star per turn. Which is fine, because in order to get the robots going, they just need that extra minion text in order to spam like 4 or 5 robots. And that's where the 2 copies of Togetherness power comes into play. After you play one of those, you're essentially saying, okay, I can do a 4 or 5 robot spam this turn, or even more sometimes. Now taking a look at cards from other factions that I haven't already mentioned, you can see that there are plenty of cards that let you spam more minions. Like I said, playing an extra minion is basically the key text that you need in order to spam maybe 4 or 5 minions. So taking a look at all these different factions, there's a lot of pretty good pairings for the robots. Even just 1 or 2 copies of these cards in a faction can really just make the difference. So yeah, definitely pause the video if you want to take a more in-depth look. And something else I do want to note is that these cards are not all the cards in the game that promote spamming. There's plenty more and some that I've even missed going through all the factions. Alright, let's take a look at the great pairings for the robots by the community. So the community does think by a mile that the Mythic Horses is the go-to faction to pair with the robots. And that definitely makes sense. We did talk about that. 17 votes for the Mythic Horses, 8 votes for the zombies, which makes sense, 7 votes for the halflings, 5 votes for the wizards, 3 votes for the itty critters, 3 votes for the killer plants, 2 votes for the vampires, 2 votes for the penguins, 2 votes for 𝐸𝐻𝐻, and then 2 votes for the Mythic Greeks. Now I do think there are some non-ideal pairings for the robots. Now they might not be the worst thing in the world like other factions would have non-ideal pairings, but really I think the robots have better faction pairings with lower powered minions, so that they can really just spam as much as possible. So the factions that showcase higher powered minions may not be ideal, such as the superheroes, the princesses, or the bear cavalry. Alright, moving on to the favorable matchups for the robots. I really think that the robots have favorables across the board. Minion spamming is just insane. However, one that I do think is so good for the robots is in fact the aliens, because the aliens' main thing is putting your minions back into the hand. And if you're gonna put the robots back into your hand, well, that's just resetting another spam turn for you, and yeah, you like to see it. Like I alluded to earlier in the video, I don't think the robots have really any unfavorables. They're pretty much just 50-50. Now some of these factions that I do have listed do provide a little bit of annoyance, such as like the tricksters, the zombies, the pirates, or the sharks, but yeah, nothing less than a 50-50. It pretty much comes down to the luck of the draw. And with that said, we're getting closer and closer to the end of the base game faction reviews. Next up will be the Wizards, so make sure you are a part of the Smash Posting Facebook group so you can vote what faction pairs best with the Wizards. I do want to mention that there will be a giveaway on the channel very soon towards the end of the faction reviews for the base game. So make sure you are subscribed and you stay tuned. Please leave a like on the video if you did, and until next time, we'll see you in the next one. Peace!